Hey, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Chantel. I'm a knitwear designer behind KNITATUDE, and I wanted to talk about short rows. I was just on my book tour in Victoria and Vancouver. If you don't know that I wrote a book, I wrote a full book called Sweater Success, and essentially teaches you all the things that you need to be able to make the best decisions to making your either first sweater or just sweaters in general. And one of the things that we started talking about a lot was short rows, because in one of my patterns, this one, the simple stockinette raglan, there are short rows in it. And we just got on this topic about the idea of short rows and the fact that a lot of people find them really nerve-wracking. So I wanted to put together an entire kind of yap and chat of all the things that I have learned about short rows and essentially bestow that onto you so that you can use it in any pattern that you are coming up on. And then I kind of explain essentially what short rows are, how they're worked, what they do, and where you can use them, and how to be able to insert them into pretty much any pattern that you have, whether they have short rows or they don't. So yeah, come along with this journey. I've even got diagrams for you, but let's hang out. Let's talk about short rows. So if you have ever found that you made a head knit sweater and you're pulling down the neckline, you're it feels like it's choking me, it's really, really riding up, or say that you have a larger bust and the protrusion of your bust is literally lifting up the hem, meaning that it might show a bit of your hem off in the front, or it's not lying evenly, short rows are your best bet. Essentially what they are is that instead of finishing a full row, you're creating a smaller wedge of fabric by going only to a certain point, turning, and turning. Don't worry, I again will show you an entire way of how short rows are done. But essentially what they do is they create this wedge of fabric, usually at the nape of the neck or just above the underarm split of any sweater. It can be a top-down construction, a bottom-up construction, a drop shoulder, a yoke, a raglan. You can use short rows really anywhere. And I find that usually in sweaters, you're going to find them at the nape of the neck when it comes to shifting the back of the sweater up and the front down. And the reason why we do that is because, I will just show my body, is that when you naturally look at a neckline, if your shoulder seam is here, naturally your neck protrudes forward while the nape of your neck goes down, which means that naturally, because our body is not built like a 2x4 and completely the same, identical on both sides, it means that we have to adjust that front neckline to be able to accommodate the fact that it has more surface level to go to and that the neck protrudes. So I find that this is one of the main reasons why you end up using short rows. Now, I will say that short rows are used in a plethora of places. If you have ever, let's say, knit a sock and you have turned a heel, that is a short row. If you have ever done bust starts, those are also short rows. Sorry, horizontal bust starts, not vertical. That's a short row. If you have ever found that you did a inset sleeve where you started adding more rows here, not going completely around, that is also a short row. A short row is a technique where essentially you will not go completely to the end of your row or the end of your round. Essentially what it does is that it creates a wedge. And let's quickly talk about where those wedges come in and what they do. So I'm going to pull my simple stockinette raglan over. This one is a raglan construction. It is top down. This is in my book. And essentially you will see that that neckline comes down, and that's actually because of the short rows. So if I flip her around, normally where you're going to see short rows is you're going to see them in the nape of the neck here. This happens very often, especially in yokes, when you have let's say lace work or color work. Usually you want to be able to make sure that you're not doing short rows in that section. You usually do them above by going back and forth, creating this wedge, or you can also put them, which is where I've placed them in here, at the underarm, just above the underarm. Sorry, she's a little wobbly. But you can see kind of these divots. And what I've done is that essentially I've worked here, worked back, turned. I'm not finishing a complete row. I'm working a little bit farther, working to here, working a little farther, working to here, working a little farther, working to here, working a little bit farther. And what it does is it creates this little wedge of fabric. And what that fabric does is that it shifts the nape of the neck up and it lowers the the neckline down, which when doing so, if I imagine if my sweater is up here and I simply pull down, aka I shift the back up and this one down, you can see that that fabric already goes over the protrusion of my bust. It lowers the neckline and then also gives more fabric to cover the bust, and that means that your hem is going to be even in the long run. So usually when you end up seeing short rows, you're going to see them at the nape of the neck, or you'll see them just above the armpit split. Again, this happens in raglans, yokes, drop shoulders, so on and so forth. And it's just like a really nice way to be able to get that additional modification and tailoring, because when we get to literally yokes and raglans, like it's normally a square. It's equal, especially for raglans, it's equal on both sides, which means that unless you're actually like working flat for the first bit and then casting on, your neckline is naturally going to be at the same place that the nape of your neck is as well for your collar. I hope that makes sense. I find that short rows are super helpful, but there are actually two different ways to be able to do short rows. You have short to long short rows and long to short rows. I'm going to show you essentially what those are so that you can take a peek about how those are actually worked. Now, there are two ways to be able to do short rows. I'm going to show you them both. Some of them work better for a raglan, some of them work better for a yoke. So I've got my short to long. These tend to work way better for a raglan just because of the way that a raglan normally has that square neckline instead of a circular. And then we also have a long to short, which works for a yoke. So I will quickly show you both of these so you can get an idea of how they essentially work and how short rows work. The main thing to know is that when you are working short rows, you are not working an entire row. If we imagine that this is the nape of our neck, this is going to be our front. This is going to be the back. This is going to be the nape of the neck. So one thing we want to imagine is that we are knitting this in the round. This is our beginning of row. We're going to work all the way around. And all of a sudden when we come to our short rows, we're going to do partial rows and we're going to ignore a certain aspect or part of our sweater. So if this is going to be the nape of our neck right here, what we're going to do is that usually we'll tell you to knit a certain amount of rows until a certain stitch. From there, it has you come back, work past that marker in the middle at the nape of the neck and go up to a matching stitch. It's going to turn around and work up a little bit farther, because again, we're going from shorter amounts to longer in between, and then it's going to turn around, work all the way back, go a little bit farther, turn, work all the way back, and you essentially get this like U shape going farther to like stitches past. So imagine that this is like 5 stitches, then that is knit 5 stitches past, double stitch, whatever it is, that would be, let's say 5 past, 5 more past, 5 more past. And then once you've done, technically this is 4 short rows, you're then going to get to your beginning of row marker and then continue. And essentially what we've done is that we have not added any rows in this section, but we have added a wedge of fabric in this. This is what helps shift that up. Now, when it comes to a yoke, a long to short row actually works a little bit better just because of the actual framing of it and how it shifts. So with this one, you would essentially work a longer. So let's say that you are working like 50 stitches, 50 stitches, and then you only work 45 stitches past the marker, 45 stitches past the marker, 40 stitches, and you're essentially starting out going farther, but then coming smaller, and you're always doing that turn. From here, then you would go straight back to your beginning of row and then continue. Again, you have a larger section which doesn't end up having those stitches worked. You still get more of a fabric, but you can tell that it's got long to shorter versus this one is shorter to longer. And that's kind of how short rows end up essentially working. What you're doing is that you're just not working a full row. You're working a partial row. Now that I've shown you on paper, I can also show you on an actual knit. Essentially what you would do is that, let's say that my beginning of round marker is at the very back of the raglan. What I could do, I didn't do it in my simple stockinette raglan, I did it at the very bottom so that you wouldn't have to increase and do short rows at the same time. But essentially, I would work to about an inch from the clavicle. Like if you imagine that you have this bone right here, I like to go about an inch. And I would, if I was doing short to long, I would come to about an inch within the clavicle, work and use my short row and turn my work to come to, again, within an inch of that clavicle, go back, working all the way over, going a little bit farther than what my last double stitch was, coming all the way across, going a little bit farther, coming a little across, going a little farther, a little farther, a little farther. And essentially what that does is that it creates that short row with more fabric and that wedge of fabric in the actual back nape of the neck, doing exactly what I've been talking about, which is shifting up and then also shifting the neckline down. Now, I did talk about two different ones, which was a short to long and a long to short. And let me explain where you might use those in another pattern, because one is specific to, well, one is better for a raglan, one of them is better for a yoke. Let's talk about it. In most modern day patterns, I keep seeing a lot of short to long short rows, which is essentially where you're really working into that front nape. And this one actually works really, really well for a raglan. So when you notice a raglan, it has more of a square shape of it because you end up having the front and the back are the same and the sleeves are usually the same. So when you usually put a top down raglan down, it does have that square neckline, which then means that it's kind of the same in both. Now, with a raglan, usually you want to see short to long just because then it starts to really come into the neckline. And that's because unlike a yoke, you're more thinking of lowering the neckline versus really raising that back. So that's why you are usually going into those front stitches and going more closer to the clavicle. Now, when it comes to a yoke, I highly suggest doing long to short rows. Longer as in you've gone all the way, then you do less, then you do less, then you do less. And you're not actually working as far into that clavicle area. And that's mainly because with the yoke, you actually need to really raise that back neckline up because a circular yoke is literally just a circle. Versus an actual square. So I found that really, really interesting. I ended up learning that from Talvi Knits. She has two beautiful blog posts that I will put down in the show notes below. Highly suggest checking those out because those were just a total game changer for me because my designer brain was like, ooh, I like learning that. What's next? So now that you have gotten a better idea of how those work and what short rows work better for different constructions, I'm going to move her out of the way because we don't need her anymore. You may be wondering how to be able to include short rows into a pattern that you have that doesn't have a short row. So I will say that because KNITATUDE patterns are solely based well, or mainly focus on really beginner knits. I don't have a lot of short rows in my patterns because I find that they really freak beginner knitters out. So if you ever wanted to put short rows into my patterns or any other pattern that you have seen out there, let's quickly talk you through that. So we already talked about raglans, essentially going to that clavicle, working that either at the nape of the neck or at the above the underarm split. We already talked about yokes that you would want to do a long to short. Now that you have realized that, it now comes into where do you place these? So for either of these constructions or any of the constructions really, you want to base everything off of the middle nape of your neck. So I always suggest putting a, a row marker there and then working those around. Again, depending on what your construction is, we already talked a little bit about how far those should go. But the other question that I always end up seeing is, how many short rows should I be doing? And that's actually based off of the slope of your shoulder. So I don't have a ruler with me, and you might need a friend for this one, but I find that you should grab any hard object. I've got a pen. You're going to place it at the bottom of your neck where it meets your shoulder, and you're going to put it straight out. I hope this is straight. I don't totally know. But essentially you're going to do as many short rows fit in this section because it is following the slope of your shoulder. Is following the slope of your shoulder, and that is the difference that you need to actually bring that up. So essentially I'm going to do as many short rows would fit into here in my gauge swatch. So let's say that I have 6 rows per this much. I know that I could probably hit 3 because when you're doing your short rows, it is 2 rows per. So I would know that if I need to hit, this is 6 rows, I know that I could hit 1, 2, 3 before I keep on going. So that should give you a pretty rough idea about how many short rows you should be adding in your pattern to be able to really raise that. See, aren't short rows fun? I feel like as soon as you end up understanding them and know where to be able to place them, like the world becomes your oyster. So don't be afraid to be able to add them in patterns or anything like that. I will say that I am not the be-all, end-all knowledge queen when it comes to short rows. So if you know more things, I would love for you to add those in the comments. Sharing is caring. Let's keep that on with the community, as well as I would love to learn more things because I feel like when it comes to knitting, there are so many things that we don't know. And sorry, I just hit her. There's so many things that we don't know and we can learn from each other. So if you liked this video and you really enjoyed it and it made you learn something, feel free to like, comment, subscribe below. I'm really trying to grow my YouTube channel, as well as I do have a coffee link below. If you're like, man, that was really, really informational, I really enjoyed it, feel free to send me a coffee if you want, no pressure. As well as if you haven't checked out my Sweater Success book, I will put links below. This one is to be able to essentially give you all the confidence to knitting either your first sweater or making better sweater decisions in your upcoming sweaters. It is essentially a textbook from start to finish, all the things that you need to know from casting on to casting off to literally taking care of your knits, everything like that. So if you want to check out my book, I would really appreciate that. And otherwise, I will see you guys on the flip side.